mind, we will start as usual with prayers, and then a little bit of meditation related to something we looked at last week. So for the prayers, if you can, visualize the Buddha in front. You can visualize all the refuge objects if you wish, but mainly the Buddha, who embodies all objects of refuge. I really feel that you're in the presence of someone who has totally transformed their mind, made it free of everything negative, mistaken, afflictive, and totally perfected in everything positive, especially compassion, love, wisdom, and so on. And they're there to help us and guide us do the same with our minds. Totally confident that we can do that. And it's just a question of doing the right things. So all of those things are included in this teaching of the Lamrim, the stages of the path. So really feel how fortunate we are that we have the chance to learn this under the guidance of the Buddha and the Three Jewels, and feel that you're doing this not just for yourself, but for the sake of all sentient beings.
To the teacher endowed, transcendent destroyer, one thus gone, full destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one got to bliss, know the world, supreme guide, beings to be tamed. Teacher of gods and humans, to you, the Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings and go for refuge. When, O supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paced seven strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you, who are wise, then I bow. With pure bodies, form supremely fine, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the three worlds, winner, the best supreme guide, to you I bow. With the supreme signs, face like the spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the three worlds are not incomparable, wise one, to you I bow. Great, compassionate, protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms, unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom too, well established in the trainings, the holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame, a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, seek and do things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all-seeing, subdue the four faults, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, foreland, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you, may all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guru Rana Mandalakam Niriyatayami. I take refuge refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
So take a few minutes to settle down, make sure you're sitting in a good position for meditation and your mind is calm and settled, clear. So last week we looked at the meditation on equanimity, developing a balanced state of mind, especially towards other people, other beings. And Lama Tsongkhapa recommends starting with so-called neutral beings. Those are the ones that we neither have attachment for nor aversion for. So let's try this out. And so to think of a neutral person, you could imagine being in a crowd, like at an airport or shopping mall or just on a busy street, and there's all these people around that you don't know at all. And then just pick one of those people, an imaginary person, out of that crowd and put that person right in front of you right now. Just imagine that person in front of you and you're looking at them. And as you do that, check what's happening in your mind, what kind of thoughts, feelings, attitudes you have. So Lama Tsongkhapa said the kind of attitude we usually have for such people is a neglectful equanimity, kind of indifference. So if you notice that in your mind, then see if you can recognize that this state of mind isn't helpful to you as well as to them, especially if your goal is to follow the Bodhisattva's path, which involves developing universal love and compassion and bodhicitta. So some ways we can start having a more positive attitude, more genuine equanimity, caring equanimity rather than neglectful one, would be to contemplate things like this person is basically just like me. It's another person, another human being with a mind, thoughts, and feelings, and they have the wish to be happy. They want to have happiness and good experiences and don't want any suffering or problems, just like me. Another recommended thought is that they're not really a stranger, because in past lives we have known this person, we've been in relationships with this person, even the most intimate relationships like mother and child or father and child or partners, siblings, friends. So we just don't remember those experiences. But the Buddha said they did happen. We did have very close relationships with this person, and this person was very dear to us. We felt incredible love and compassion for them. So that way of thinking can be difficult if you're not 100% convinced that we did have past lives. But we can also just think about what happens in this life and how relationships are impermanent. So we have had friends, very, very close, dear friends in this lifetime. But before becoming friends, those people were strangers. There was a time when we didn't know them, we didn't feel anything for them. And then we met them, we started sharing experiences, and we became friends. And the same could happen with this person we imagine in front of us. It's possible that that relationship could become very close. We could have very, very strong, loving, caring feelings towards this person. So as a conclusion, see if you can understand that whether we love someone or hate them, whether we care about them or we're indifferent to them, this is mainly due to our own mind, what is happening in our mind, rather than anything to do with the other person. And so fortunately we can work on our mind, we can change our mind, and there's lots of methods that we're learning in the Lamrim and the Buddhist teachings that we can use to bring about such changes in our minds, to really make the determination to do that. So we spent quite a bit of time last week looking at this point of equanimity. It's actually really interesting. We can learn a lot about relationships and about ourselves by doing this kind of meditation. Because human relationships are incredibly important. Like the Dalai Lama often talks about how we human beings are social animals. I don't think that's normally talked about in Buddhist teaching. I think he learned that from discussing with Western scientists and psychologists and sociologists. But he certainly agrees that, yeah, for most human beings, most human beings can't really live alone. There's these stories about people living in caves and hermitages all by themselves for years and years and years. But I think people like that are rare. Most people would go crazy if they had to live like that. So most of us do need other people around to relate to, just to feel fulfilled and satisfied and happy. So relationships are important for most of us, but they can also be so problematic. They can be a cause of so much suffering and confusion. And but a lot of it has to do with our own mind and what's going on in our mind. And so these teachings give us a lot of food for thought and recognizing afflictions. So that's really what we can learn from this meditation on equanimity, is how much afflictions play a role in the way we look at others, the way we relate to others. And then, of course, there's lots of tools for working on our afflictions. And I was thinking that, yeah, I think we all kind of abhor the practice of discrimination, racial discrimination or discrimination on the basis of gender or sexual orientation or mental, physical abilities and so on. So we think, oh, it's really wrong to discriminate people. But then if we look at our own mind, we all do it. It's very difficult, very, very difficult not to discriminate. It's just kind of our human nature, or our nature as unenlightened beings. So we can learn a lot about ourselves and see a lot of work we need to do to really get beyond this tendency to discriminate. And also in volume 5, which you'll be getting to one of these days, there's a lot of information about equanimity, both from the Pali tradition as well as the Mahayana tradition. So the Pali tradition mainly relies on a text called Path of Purification, the Visuddhimagga by Buddha Gosha. He lived back, I don't know, 5th century or something. And that's kind of like a really, really important text in the Pali tradition, the Theravada tradition explains everything you need. It's kind of like the Lamrim, everything you need to do to reach nirvana. And so there's a lot of information in that text about the four immeasurable thoughts, love, compassion, joy, and equanimity. And so there's some things he says about equanimity that aren't really found in our tradition. So just for example, on page 8 of volume 5, it says, Buddhaghosa describes equanimity as characterized by promoting the aspect of balance toward beings. Its function is to see equality in beings. It manifests as the subduing of anger and attachment. Its proximate cause is seeing the ownership of karma. Thus, beings are owners of their karma, whose, if not theirs, is the choice by which they will become happy, or will be free from suffering, or will not lose the success they have attained. So that's, the contemplation of karma, thinking in terms of karma, isn't normally explained in our tradition as something to use to cultivate equanimity. So he recommends thinking about karma to bring about a more equanimous mind. And here's a bit more about that from the sort of commentary in volume 5. It says, understanding karma fosters equanimity. People meet with results of causes they created. For example, when we encounter misfortune, there's no reason for depression. The situation is a result of actions we ourselves did, and as with everything, it too will pass. When success comes our way, there's no reason for elation, because it is a passing result of our actions. Rather than blame other people, we accept the results of our actions, knowing that if we want a different future, we must act now to create the causes for it. So that seems to be talking about cultivating equanimity regarding our own experiences, not so much people, but things that happen to us. And I have noticed that in the Theravada tradition, they do talk about equanimity in that way, not just towards people and beings, but with regard to our experiences. Good experiences or bad experiences, instead of the mind going up and down like a yo-yo, excited, elated, over the moon when good things happen, which can include meditative experiences, right? When you're meditating and you have some great experience, some great session of meditation, then you're just so excited, and maybe you think this is going to be like that from now on. And then the next session is like, whoa, it's like a hell realm. So yeah, that it is explained that we need to have a balanced attitude, equanimous attitude with our experiences in meditation, and not get excited about and attached to the good ones, and then miserable and depressed and down in the dumps about the not so good ones. And actually it's better not even to have those kind of categories. That was a good meditation, that was a bad meditation, but just whatever happens, accept it and deal with it and make the best with it and see it all as part of the path. So that's another way of talking about equanimity, just keeping your mind balanced and even about the ups and downs, the so-called good and bad, let me finish, the good and bad experiences that we have. I haven't encountered that in our tradition, talking about equanimity in that way, but I think that is very helpful. And so it can be regarding our own experiences as well as others. And then also in the book, in volume 5, it says, equanimity is the state of observing another's suffering or happiness and thinking these appear because of that individual's own past activities. So I think that's another way of bringing in equanimity with regard to other people. Their experiences are also the result of their karma. Because again, when someone we love and care about, somebody really important to us, is having a bad time, we can get very upset about that, very depressed about that, and maybe feel personally responsible because they are my friend, they're my relative, I need to take care of this, and it can get us into some unhealthy states of mind. Of course, we do want to help them as much as we can, but just to keep in mind karma, the role that karma plays, and that can help us not get overly depressed or overly upset or frustrated if we're not able to help them as much as we would like to. Just to remember that, beings are the owners of their karma. They are experiencing the results of their own karma. And it's not my fault if my friend or my relative is having a bad time. Yeah, people do that. People, I think, have that tendency of feeling personally responsible for making everything okay for their loved ones, their friends and relatives. We try, of course, we do what we can, but if our attempts are not, don't work, then not to blame ourselves and get depressed about that. Yeah, so thinking of karma, the law of cause and effect, can be helpful both for our own experiences, good and bad, but also the experiences of others. It can help us to keep more balanced, equanimous states of mind. Yeah, so a lot to learn about equanimity. So, Venerable Sangye.
I just finished reading Loving Kindness by Sharon Salzberg, and the way you just described the equanimity meditation is exactly what she said. It's like in the Pali tradition, you focus on how all beings are the owners of their karma, and that helps balances out the other three immeasurables from devolving into despair or attachment or excitement.
Yeah, and also in the Pali tradition, the order of the four is that equanimity comes last. Here it comes first, and it makes sense. I mean, it's not wrong to have it one way or the other. It makes sense that if we're trying to cultivate love and compassion and bodhicitta, that we have to have a balanced state of mind so that we are willing to extend love and compassion for everybody and not leave anyone out. But yeah, in the Pali tradition, it is it's at the end, which is how it is. Let's see, in the prayer of the four immeasurables. There's different versions of the prayer of the four immeasurables, and I think in the Chenrezig sadhana, you're doing the long version of the four immeasurables, and there it does come last, right? No, it comes first. Oh, okay. So it's the short version that it comes last. Okay. Anyway, there's different reasons for having it at the beginning or at the end. But yeah, in the Pali tradition, and also in some Buddhist scriptures, like Vasubandhu's Abhidharmakosha, it's also explained as coming. It's related to the four jhanas, the four concentrations. So equanimity is a higher level. Love is first, and then compassion. They're kind of progressively more difficult. So if you're struggling with equanimity, don't be surprised. It is difficult to really have equanimity. And in some explanations, it does come at a higher level. Any other questions or comments before we move on?
In the Q&A a few days ago, a couple of us were talking about how when doing the equanimity meditation and bringing people to mind, it's very easy to get wrapped up in stories or memories. And and just, yeah, kind of get a bit pulled away or get caught up in the attachment or for regret about things that we've done with those people to arise, and kind of pulling away from the intended purpose. I just wanted to know if you had any advice around how to work with memories, or kind of just how to keep on track with when doing the equanimity meditation, when we're bringing different people to mind, and yeah.
To avoid getting carried away by the stories. Well, I don't know. I mean, it is useful, I think, to look at the stories, because again, we get a better understanding of our mind and the way that our mind works. But then, yeah, it's not helpful to get all caught up in regret and guilt and, oh, I behaved so terribly in that situation. That isn't helpful. So I think I don't know. I can't think of a specific example of this myself, but just to, yeah, not go too far into that old experience. If you did make mistakes, you realize mistakes that you made, just make the determination to try to not to make those mistakes again. Add that to your purification practice when you're doing purification. Try not to get caught up in guilt and self recrimination and so on and so forth. So just try to see the dangers that could occur if you get too caught up in those memories, and bring yourself back to, like you say, back to the real point of the practice. That's all I can think of. Yeah. Selden.
I was thinking the other day about having equanimity within the community, and how in the past, I've either irritated, made angry, or people have laughed with me, or I've been irritated at them. And so the whole, friends, enemies, and strangers, that's true, I think. And also that it's like everyone wants to be happy and wants to avoid suffering, and to try and think of it in that way too.
I guess even in one day, our mind can swing from seeing somebody as a friend to an enemy to a stranger, maybe even 1 hour, even 5 minutes. So, yeah, just taking things more lightly rather than seriously, concrete, carved in stone. Okay, so then moving on. So we're on page 201, right in the middle, where it says, establishing that they all have a likable aspect. Okay, so this is the second kind of main point in the outline after establishing equanimity, or trying to anyway, making our mind even towards others. And then next step is to see them as likable. And yeah, the term used here in Tibetan for likable is yiong, which is usually translated as beautiful or attractive. And also in some books, it's not really in this book, but in some books, there's a term, it's a type of love that is called yiong jamba. Jamba is the word for love. And I used to get really confused about that, because normally there's love, and great love, which is the wish for others to be happy. And then there was this other term, yongi jampa, which sometimes is translated as affectionate love or heartwarming love. In volume 5, Yeah, volume 5, there is some information about it in there. And there it's called heartwarming love that sees all sentient beings as endearing. So my understanding is, from what I've read and heard, that type of love, this heartwarming love or endearing love or affectionate love, is something that will just arise kind of naturally, spontaneously, by meditating on the next 3 points of this process. Point number 2, 3, no, sorry, 1, 2, and 3. So the first 3 points of the sevenfold cause and effect, seeing all beings as mothers, remembering their kindness, and then wanting to repay their kindness. So by meditating on those points really well, for all living beings, then it said this heartwarming love, this endearing love will just arise naturally, spontaneously. And they say the best example of that type of love is the way a mother or a father sees their child, yeah, especially when they're newly born, they're infants, and they're so small and helpless and cute and totally dependent. And so, yeah, the parents who brought that child into the world, that child to them is just the most beautiful. Even if, not all babies are beautiful, but, in the eyes of their parents, they are beautiful. Yeah, parents always see their children as so beautiful. So that kind of love that a parent feels towards their child is, they say, the best example of this kind of love. And that's what we're trying to cultivate as we go through these 7 points. We're trying to generate that kind of feeling towards everybody, all sentient beings. And then, it said on the basis of that, we expand love, point number 4, and meditate on wishing all beings to have every type of happiness, and gradually wanting to do that ourselves, to do what it takes to ensure that they do have that kind of happiness. Does that make sense? But here, in this text, Lama Tsongkhapa doesn't go into that other kind of love, but he just talks about seeing them as likable or endearing, or it's more than likable. It's like really seeing them as wonderful and fantastic, and someone I want to take care of. Okay, so then. Okay, so there's 3 points. Establishing that they all have a likable aspect has 3 points. Meditating on them as one's mother, remembering their kindness, and meditating on repaying their kindness. So first, meditating on them as one's mother. In the sutras, it is taught that since cyclic existence is beginningless, our births are also beginningless. Therefore, we have been born and we have died incessantly, so that there is no body in cyclic existence that we have not taken, no place where we have not been born, and also no one who has not been a relative, such as our mother. So this is extremely difficult. Very challenging to really accept, kind of mind-blowing, mind-boggling. Yeah, it is, because it means no beginning to it all, no number, no fixed number on how many lives we've had, and no limit on the kind of bodies we've had. We've had every type of body, we've been every type of being, had every type of experience. We've been every place. Nothing new in samsara. And of course, we can't prove it. It can't be proven because we don't remember. We can't have our own first-hand experience of this. It's something spoken by the Buddha. Buddha, who is believed to be omniscient, all-knowing, able to see everything. So the Buddha talked about this, and you can't see the beginning, you can't see anyone who hasn't been your mother, and so on. So generally we rely on the Buddha to accept this, although the Tibetans do rely on logic. In Pabong, this section here is quite short. It's 2 paragraphs. But if you're interested, you might want to look at Pabongka Rinpoche's Liberation in the Palm of the Hand. He has several pages on this topic and quotes Dharmakirti Pramanavartika, which we did study some years ago, and the reasoning used there that there needs to be concordance between cause and effect. A cause and its effect have to have some concordance, like, a certain type of seed will bring a certain type of plant, but not any kind of plant. So a tomato seed, you plant tomato seeds, you're not going to get cucumbers or something else, right? It's only tomatoes. So there needs to be a concordance between a cause and what it produces. And that's like a Buddhist principle, one of the principles of causality in Buddhism. And it's also just in the world. I mean, we just know that's how things are. But then when it comes to the mind, what is the cause of the mind? It has to be mind, okay? Because mind is non-material, non-physical. It isn't made of, matter, particles. And so this notion that many people nowadays believe that mind is produced by the brain just doesn't work. The brain is something physical, something material. And from something physical, you can't get something immaterial. So it's a theory, my understanding. I haven't studied science. That is the theory, but it's not proven. Okay, they don't actually have proof for it. Is that correct? Okay, I thought you know more about science than me, so I'm looking at you. But yeah, what I've heard is it really is just a theory, and but so many people believe in it as if it is an established fact. And there were, back at the time of the Buddha, and even before the Buddha, there were people who thought that way too. The Charvakas, the hedonists, particular school. They also didn't accept the existence of things that couldn't be physically perceived, things that can't be seen and touched and so on. So they didn't believe in past lives. They didn't believe in karma. They didn't believe in, what else? I forget. But anyway, yeah, only what we can see with our senses, only that exists. Anything else is airy-fairy. It doesn't exist. So it's not a new idea. It's been around a long time. But yeah, the Buddhist answer to that is, well, just because you can't see it physically doesn't prove it doesn't exist. And you have your mind, and you can use your mind to see your mind, and and if you develop your mind through practicing meditation, you can prove these things. You can remember your past lives. And you can even see other beings' minds and remember their past lives. So through the practice of meditation, we can gain the ability to prove these things, to verify these things for ourselves. But at present, with our limited mind, our limited ability to see things and know things, we're not able to prove that. But it can be proven. But anyway, so Tibetans usually rely on that particular aspect of causality, that cause and effect have to be the same kind of phenomena. They have to be concordant. So something non-material, like consciousness, simply cannot be produced by something physical, something material. And I've heard or read that some scientists accept that as well, that, how can you say that neurons can produce consciousness? It doesn't, it's crazy. So not everybody believes that. But that's what, the Tibetans use that. But I think also being born in Tibet, being born in a society, at least old Tibet, the way it used to be, um, uh, just being surrounded by people who believe that, and also amazing lamas who have these amazing abilities, and probably most people just believed it and didn't doubt it. So for us, it's a little more challenging, but try not to close. I just tell people, try not to be closed to the idea. Try to at least be open to the idea and keep exploring it. So then he goes on to say, moreover, not only have they been our mother in the past, they will also be so in the future. So again, we'll have further lives after this one. This isn't the end of everything. We'll be born again and again and again. And most of those lives, we will have a mother who brings us into the world. And who are those mothers? Who will be our mothers in future lives? Well, all the people and beings around us now, they're going to be our mothers. They're going to play that role again and again in the future. Therefore, reflecting in that way, try to gain firm certainty that they have been your mother. For once that certainty arises, it will be easy to remember their kindness and so forth. On the other hand, if it does not arise, you will have no basis for remembering their kindness and so forth. So this is an important point. It's said that, if we really want to develop bodhicitta, we do need to get this one. So I just have something here. Yeah, in Pabong Rinpoche's book, he says, having the attitude that the Guru is actually a Buddha, and the understanding that all sentient beings have at one time been your mother, are the two most difficult Lamrim topics to develop. Okay, so there's an experienced meditator who's saying, yeah, it is hard. And I heard, he doesn't mention this in his book, but I heard somewhere that he spent a whole year in retreat, like meditating again and again and again. It took him a year to get this one. Maybe that sounds like a short time, but kind of shows that it's not easy. It's not something you can get just like that. You have to think about it again and again and again. And so I recommend reading what he wrote, because he did find it challenging to get this one. It didn't come easily, even though he was born in Tibet, steeped in Tibetan culture. He was a Rinpoche. He, I don't know how many previous lives he had as a meditator. So if it took him a long time and it was hard work to get this one, it's not surprising that it would be difficult for us as well. And he also explains the criteria that show when you have gained this understanding after repeated practice. He says, if you see a sentient being, even an ant, you will involuntarily remember that you were once that being's child, and that all your happiness and suffering depended upon it. So even seeing an ant. When he says you will involuntarily remember, I don't think that necessarily means remember as in having memory, but the word for mindfulness. Mindfulness is also the same word for remember. So I'm guessing that he means you will just have this awareness, this mindfulness, that this was my mother, this little ant, this little fly, this little worm or whatever was my mother and was incredibly kind to me. And so you'd have this feeling of gratitude towards that being. So that's, we have to keep meditating on this topic until we get to that point and have that experience. Robin, did you want to say something?
I've read, I'm sure many of us have read accounts of people remembering their past lives. The ones I've read have usually been their just previous life. And it just occurred, well, two things. I just read the last few chapters of Big Love, and there's an after, about Lama Yeshe's life, and the afterword is written by his next person. And I recommend reading the afterword. It's quite extraordinary. One thing the fellow said is, yeah, I remembered my time as Lama Yeshe in my early years, but I've completely forgotten. Now I cannot recall any longer. And so that was striking, but also it just occurred to me, one was never one's mother just previous to our birth. And so maybe it is really hard to recall somebody being their mother, because it was some time ago, at least 2 lifetimes ago.
Yeah. The Dalai Lama says the same, that when he was very young, he could remember his past life. But then as he got older, those memories faded. And Carol Bowman, an American woman who did a lot of research and wrote some books about children remembering past lives. And and she says the same. She says that it's usually between the ages of 2 and 5 that children are most likely to recall and talk about past lives. But then after the age of 5, those memories tend to fade, which kind of makes sense because your mind starts filling up with a lot of new information about this life and the TV programs you're watching and your friends and so on. So then those memories from the past life fade, but they're still pretty fresh when children are very, very young. So I think that, for me personally, and I think for a lot of people, that is a helpful way of becoming more accepting of, reincarnation. If you read stories, accounts of people who are usually children, young children, who can talk about their past lives and sometimes able to give very detailed information about their past life, which can be verified. And then it becomes difficult to explain that in any other way. Like, how did this little kid know that? And there's one story in her book. We have it in the library. Do you remember the name of it? Carol Bowman's book. Anyway, we have a section of books on reincarnation. There was one story, because when she started going kind of public, she was on Oprah Winfrey. What's it called? Oprah's show? Oprah Winfrey show. So then, she got kind of famous, and a lot of people were writing to her and telling her stories about what their kids did and said and so on. And there was one story I thought was so sweet. There was this little boy, I think he was about 4 years old, and a button came off of his trousers, and the mother said, "Oh, I'll sew it back on again." And the little kid said, "No, I'll do it." And the mother was like, "Okay." And she watched as this little kid, she had never taught him how to sew, right? And if it's not easy, right? Especially with buttons. And it was the kind of button that has 4 holes, a 4-holed button. So she watched with amazement as he took a piece of thread and needle, threaded the needle, and then sewed this button on his trousers. And she said, "Where did you learn to do that?" And he said, "Oh, when I was on the ship." And then he told a story that in some past life, he had been on one of these ships with the tall masts, probably in the 1800s or early 1900s when they had those kind of ships. And they were out at sea for a long time, and they didn't have their mothers there to sew their buttons on for them. So they had to learn how to, repair their own clothes. And so he was able to talk about that life and he could name the different kind of masts on the ship. And the mother was like, she didn't know that. So it's like, well, how do you explain that? And, he hadn't been watching TV programs about these old, what do they call those kind of ships? Those schooners, frigates. Yeah, anyway, those old-fashioned kind of ships. He hadn't, hadn't had access to that kind of information. So it just kind of makes you more open to the idea of, past lives we have lived before. Mm. And there was also one story, one little kid who, I'm trying to remember now, I don't remember the details, but I think no, that's right. He went to a preschool, and the teacher of the preschool, he recognized as having been, not his mother, but his wife or something. And he was really attached to this person. And he was able to talk about, their past life together. So interesting. Anyway.
Carol Bowman's book is called Children's Past Lives, How Past Life Memories Affect Your Child.
Children's past lives, yeah. It's kind of a fun book to read, lots of stories. Her own children, she had 2 children, both of them remembered past lives. And that's actually how she got into all this, because she had 2 children, a girl and a boy. The boy was younger. When he was about 5 years old, they went to a 4th of July celebration, and there were these big fireworks going off. And he became hysterical. As soon as the fireworks started, he just started screaming and crying, and she couldn't calm him down. She had to take him home. And it took a long time for him to calm down. And she thought, he never behaved like that before. What's going on? And then she had a friend who was some kind of therapist, and he did past life regression. So one day when he was visiting the house, they asked the little boy if he would be interested to try it out. And he said yes. So he was very quickly went into a state where he could remember a past life. And he talked about being a soldier in the Civil War. And he was out on the battlefield, and there were these cannons booming, And he was just terrified, it's shooting. He actually got shot in the wrist, and just remembered trying to hide behind a boulder and being terrified, and the sound of the cannons. So the fireworks reminded him of that. That's how this, the terror, the fear came up. And by remembering, this is often the case, by remembering the previous life and the experience that's being triggered in this life, you're able to pass beyond that. You no longer have that kind of fear. But that was what triggered her interest in this whole phenomena. And then, she learned a lot and did a lot of research, and then wrote this book. And the purpose of the book, a big part of the purpose, was to educate parents. If your child, it's quite possible your child will start talking about some previous life and how to deal with that. Because a lot of parents will say, just shut up, don't talk about that, I don't want to hear about that, that's nonsense. So they're kind of, that's not a good response for the child. So she gives advice to parents, what to do if your child does start talking about these things. Tenzin.
I just recall that years back, there is a Mingyur Rinpoche actually appeared on a Time magazine.
Oh, what?
On a Time magazine.
Yeah.
On the scientific research of his meditation on compassion. And then they measured the brain activity, and they found out that there is a part of the brain that associates with happiness that is very active during the measurement when he was meditating on the compassion or love.
Are you talking?
Mingyur Rinpoche.
Oh, Mingyur Rinpoche.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, I think I really appreciate Tibetans, how they actually phrase it as remembering the mothers, because in the Pali tradition, we meditate as all sentient beings as our child. But I don't have a child, so it's very difficult for me to associate.
Yeah, they do emphasize all beings as mothers. In Nagarjuna, that text called the wish-fulfilling dream, something like that, he does mention seeing all beings as one's child. And I like that too. I think it's good to think both. Yeah, that to think in both ways. Because it does say that that is the kind of love that we want to develop. We want to develop this type of love that a mother has for her child, where she feels totally protective and responsible and wanting to take care. But to get to that point, thinking of how they've been our mother, we were their child and they were our mother, that helps us get in touch with the kindness that we have already received. Yeah, this enormous amount of kindness. So let's go on and look at that. Next point is remembering their kindness. Okay, so meditate according to Geshe Potawa, who maintained that the memory of their kindness will arise quickly after meditating on all sentient beings as your mothers, if you initially meditate on your mother of this life. Okay, so it's usually explained in terms of thinking of your mother of this life, and it's a little tricky for some people who mothers aren't always so loving and caring. Sometimes they're neglectful, don't really take care of their child, sometimes even abusive. But I tend to think that's rare, yeah, but it does happen. And so what the advice given, if your mother was abusive, not loving, not caring, maybe you had a lot of suffering in relation to your mother, you can think of somebody else. Hopefully there was somebody in your life who did give you that kind of love and care and nurturing. It may have been your father, it may have been your grandmother, it may have been an older sibling. So hopefully you can think of somebody who did care for you when you were small and helpless and gave that kind of love and kindness. And in fact, I don't remember who and where, but there's some notion that maybe the first 2 points should be reversed for some people, because if we start off with point number 1, every sentient being has been your mother, and your experience with your mother was, she was like a monster. You had a monster mother. Then, I'm supposed to see every sentient being as a monster? What's the point of that? What good is that going to do me? So I think probably for Tibetans, most Tibetan mothers were very loving and caring, and people had very close relationships with them. So thinking of every being as your mother brings up warm feelings, good feelings. But if your mother was a monster, that won't be the case. So for some people, it might be more effective to think of the second point first, to think about the kindness of mothers in general, even if your mother wasn't kind, but most mothers are. Think about the kindness of mothers, then think, okay, everybody has played that role in your life. So I think, yeah, for some people that order might work better. Okay, so let's just assume in our own case that our mother was kind. We did experience the kindness of a mother in this life, but it's, that was a time in our life that we don't remember. Most people don't remember being born, being a tiny infant, and so we need to imagine this happening. Okay, so visualize your mother in front of you in a clear aspect and repeatedly reflect, she has been my mother not only now, but countless times previously in the beginningless rounds of existence. In that way, when she was your mother, she protected you from all harm and accomplished all happiness and benefit for you. In particular, even in this life, she initially carried you in her womb for a long time. So that's really useful to think about. I remember one woman telling me that she had a real hard time with her mother until she became a mother. And then she had her own first-hand experience of what that's like, what it's like to be a mother. So that time of 9 or so months, usually more than 9 months, of having this little being in your womb, in your body, it's not easy. I don't have that experience in this life, but from what I've heard, yeah, it can be quite challenging. I know one woman, one mother, she gave birth to 3, 4, I think, kids, and she had a really, really hard time. Even the last 1 or 2 pregnancies, she had to be on the couch the whole time. She couldn't get up and move around much. So there could be a lot of pain, discomfort, hardship, inconvenience, being pregnant, having a baby grow inside of you, and also having to make changes in your lifestyle, not being able to do all the things you normally do or want to do, changing your diet. I remember my mother talking about how she was advised to eat yogurt. The doctor advised her to eat yogurt, and she always hated yogurt. She would force herself to eat yogurt because it was good for her baby. Yeah, so just contemplating that. And then the birth, he doesn't really go into that, but the whole process of giving birth, that can be incredibly difficult, painful. It goes on for hours, the labor process. And also, I can't help but think there's some anxiety there. It's a risky thing. Yeah, things can happen during childbirth that are, even causing death. Mothers, even nowadays, mothers can sometimes die, and sometimes the baby dies. Probably the mother is more concerned about the baby surviving than herself, but babies do sometimes not survive the process of birth, or something can go wrong, and then they're left damaged with some kind of disability that can't be cured. So it's like a really risky experience to give birth to a child. So you're putting yourself at risk, you're putting the baby at risk. So that's like, in addition to the physical stress and pain and discomfort, there's that mental, emotional stress as well. And then he says, then after she gave birth to you, she pressed your yellow tousled hair. I was surprised by that. How many people in Tibet had yellow hair? Anyway, against the heat of her body, swung you on her 10 fingers, nursed you with her milk, fed you and wiped away your snot with her mouth, cleaned your feces with her hands, and cared for you untiringly in many different ways. So a few of those things are maybe so relevant in the West, because we have, diapers and what are those wet things? Handy wipes. But they didn't have those in old Tibet, and even now, many places in the world, mothers don't have access to those, or they don't have the money to buy them, and so they do have to do a lot by hand, and maybe by mouth as well. Who knows? And animal mothers, animal mothers clean their babies with their mouth, right? You see with cats, mother cats lick their kittens clean, lick their bottoms after they've pooped, and even eat the poop, don't they? To keep the nest clean, they'll eat the poop. And yeah, so and we need to think about that as well, not just human mothers, but we have also, sentient beings have been our mothers when we've been animals. And so it's really beautiful and touching to look at how animal mothers take care of their offspring. Amazing things that they do, risking their lives, sometimes putting themselves in danger to protect their offspring. And so that, we call it instinct, I don't know really what instinct is, but that instinct to be a mother and take care. And nobody teaches them. You know, there's no courses for animals, you know, how to be a mother, how to take care of your offspring. It's just something that, well, maybe karma, having done it so many times before in past lives, you just know what to do when the babies pop out. But yeah, just that care that they give. I remember one time when I was in Bodh staying at Root Institute in Bodh and there's so many stray animals, mostly dogs. The cats don't survive, but the dogs survive, and many, many, many stray dogs. And they're just getting pregnant all the time and having babies. And so there was this one dog that was kind of adopted by Root Institute. And I saw her, she was not much more than a puppy herself. She was less than a year old when she became pregnant. And then, you know, one night all of a sudden these puppies started popping out of her. And I guess I wasn't there, but people who were said she just freaked out. She ran away. She didn't know what was going on. But then they got her, they brought her back, and then she did settle down. They made her a nice little place where she could take care of, I don't know, 5 or 6 puppies. And she did, you know. She was still less than a year old, and she was already a mother, and just so devoted, so dedicated to taking care of these little creatures. It was really beautiful to watch. And yeah, so yeah, we can learn a lot from observing animals as well, and just seeing the care that mothers of all types, all species, give to their offspring. In addition, she gave you food and drink when you were hungry or thirsty. Yeah, so that's what I hear is, you know, taking care of a baby is really a full-time job, and you don't get much sleep, at least for the first year or so. Like babies waking up several times in the night, every couple of hours, crying, and you have to get yourself out of bed and go and feed them. Oh, goodness. Father probably doesn't get much sleep either. She gave you clothing when you were cold. In times of need, she gave you her possessions that she would not spend on herself. You know, so mothers, you know, usually put their children first and make sure the children are fed, children have what they need, and are willing to do without for the sake of their children. When everyday necessities were hard to come by, she bore great hardship and spared herself no bad action, suffering, or bad talk to get them and give them to you. So that's another thing they sometimes mention, that mothers may sometimes create bad karma on behalf of their children. Like if food and necessities are hard to come by, mother might steal or lie or cheat or, you know, do things that are non-virtuous for the sake of their children. So they're, I mean, maybe they don't even know about karma, but yeah, they're willing to create negative karma, and that means creating the cause of suffering for themselves out of love, out of kindness, out of compassion for their children. Whenever her child suffered from a disease and so forth, she wished from the depths of her heart to die rather than for her child to die, for herself to be ill rather than for her child to be ill, and so forth. So I just read this book in our library. It's title is Across Many Mountains. It's a memoir about a Tibetan family consisting of a grandmother and then her child who became a mother, and then the third generation, and the author of the book is the granddaughter, and she was born in Switzerland, but from a Tibetan family. And she wrote the book because she wants to preserve the stories of Tibetan women. She said there's a lot of stories about lamas and monks and so on, but not many about women. And so the first third of the book, at least, is about the grandmother, the older member of the family, and had quite an extraordinary life. They lived in a very remote area in the mountains in Tibet. And she had a hard life. She became an orphan when she was just a teenager, and then later had a husband, and they started having kids. The first two children died before they were a year old. I think they were just a few months old. And then she had a third child who survived, and that's the one who became the mother of the author of the book. And then another child, a girl, who died after they escaped to India. So only one out of 4 children actually survived. And this one child had, eventually survived. When that child was 4 years old, she became very ill. And they lived maybe in Tibet, if you lived in Lhasa, there were hospitals, doctors, and so on. But where these people lived, they were out in the mountains. There were no hospitals, no doctors. So when somebody became sick, they would go to see a lama. And the lama would do a divination and then give advice what to do. And so she took her little girl to the lama, and the lama advised her to carry the child around a lake. There was a sacred lake in the neighborhood, and to do it 4 times. And it was a big lake. And normally, I think it would take people a day and a half or 2 days just to walk around the lake once. But she did it 4 times. Each time she did it in 1 day. So within 1 day, with her child on her back, a 4-year-old child isn't so small, plus, the things she needed, like food and a cooking pot and other things she needed just to survive this journey. So she did that 4 times, carrying her child around this lake, taking a day, and then probably getting some sleep along the way. But the child recovered, so it worked, whatever. But just thinking about that mother, doing that for the sake of her child, really extraordinary. But also, nowadays in the West, mothers are also willing to go to great lengths to care for their children. If the child has to go to the hospital, the mother will go there and stay with the child as much as possible, even sleeping on the floor or going without sleep. Just so concerned for their child, willing to do anything to ensure their child is healthy and survives. I don't know, I didn't finish that paragraph, did I? With effort, she did whatever she could to eliminate her child's suffering. To summarize, by whatever degree of knowledge and whatever degree of ability she had, she thought single-pointedly about ways to bring about your happiness and benefit and to remove any harm and suffering from you. So we're supposed to contemplate this with regard to our mother of this life and think, what did she actually do for me in this life? And contemplate that that's just this life, but she's also been my mother in past lives as well. Many, many times she did all these things for me in different forms, different places, different scenarios, different circumstances. And then if by meditating in this way, a mind remembering her kindness that is not just words arises, so a real heartfelt feeling of the kindness of our mother, then meditate on recognizing other friends and relatives, your father and so forth, as having been your mothers. So that's the next step, is to think, okay, my mother of this lifetime did all that for me. So did my father, so did my grandpa, my grandma, and so on and so forth. So thinking of individual people, starting with family members and friends, people you are close to. They have also been my mother and did all those things for me. Then move on to neutral persons, so strangers, people we don't know very well. So bring those to mind and think they have also been my mother and did all those things for me. Then when a similar mind arises toward them as that toward your friends and relatives, you should also meditate on recognizing your enemies as having been your mothers. Okay, so that's left for last, the hardest one. But having thought about our friends and relatives and even strangers, then our mind is more open to thinking about the people we don't like. Start with mild enemies, not your worst ones. Leave those for last. So working gradually on more and more difficult people or beings, and eventually even those that may have harmed us, have caused us a lot of harm and suffering, and we feel a lot of anger towards them. So even they have been my mother. They have done all those things for me. So if you're able to accept it, if you're able to think that way, then that can be a really good antidote to anger and grudge holding and negative feelings towards harm doers. When a similar mind arises toward them as toward your mother, proceed to recognize all beings as having been your mothers and meditate, gradually extending it more and more. So a lot of work, a lot of work there. But yeah, it is one of the things that needs to be done for bodhicitta. If we do want to develop bodhicitta and follow the bodhisattva's path and become enlightened, these are things we need to do.
As Tenzin said, it's sometimes hard for me to think about what this love would be like without having a child myself. But a friend of mine had 2 children, and when she was giving birth to the second one, something happened and she hemorrhaged. And so as she's lying there, she was aware that she was possibly going to die, and she only talked about this sometime later before she could talk about it. Her thought was that she was afraid that her first child would hate his little sister for killing mama. Like, just amazing that it's like she's possibly facing death, and her concern is the difficulties that might cause for her children. That just floored me.
Yeah. Yeah. Really selfless. Mothers are very unselfish. Maybe not totally, but compared to the rest of us, I mean, I never had the wish to be a mother. I thought I couldn't do it, but I really appreciate what mothers are able to learn, to have that experience of putting other beings first, at least your own children.
Without wanting to denigrate any of them, I would like to speak up for the fathers as well. I have seen so many of them who were really wanting to go to I don't know where for their children, and who were very sad that they couldn't build up a bond with their child as their mother had, because our society doesn't like them to.
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose, in Tibet, fathers didn't play such a big role in the upbringing of the child, and that's how it was in the West as well, in many countries, many cultures. It was mainly the mother's job. The father was out working or hunting or whatever, bringing home the food for the family. But yeah, it's nice that that has changed over the last couple of decades, at least in some places, you know, that, and it probably came from fathers themselves wanting to play a bigger role in the upbringing of children. Maybe some are resistant to it, but yeah, and some fathers maybe even play a bigger role than the mother. I know one family where they had a whole bunch of kids, and it was mainly the father who was taking care of the kids. The mother was doing other things. So yeah, sometimes they are more motherly in the upbringing of children than the mother. But yeah, Venerable Gyatso, you gave some wonderful talks about fathers. Yeah, BBC talks. So yeah, we need to think about, and that's not so much here, but in the other method for developing bodhicitta, the one of exchanging self and others. During that method, you do contemplate other beings who have been kind to you, other ways you have received kindness from others, such as your father, your grandparents, the milk deliverer and male person, and all the people. You know, I can go on and on and on. You could spend the rest of your life just thinking about all the people in this lifetime that have played a role in our happiness and our well-being. So that's...
I haven't usually heard my brother be very transparent about his life as a father, but after my sister died, we were sitting around, and he said one of his greatest regrets in life was that he wasn't more part of his children's upbringing. He was an extremely successful person. He made the kind of money that provided the kind of education and resources and home life and everything that a child could ever wish for. But now, on the back end of it, whether his children now in their 20s and 30s, he said it's something that he's always really has deeply regretted, that he wasn't there for them. Those 80-hour work weeks, you know, they cost him something. It's not that he isn't close with the kids, but to have him have that kind of insight on the back end of it, you know, caused a lot of sadness and regret on his part. And once again, being compelled by society's expectations or what dads are supposed to do, you know, and he succeeded over the moon on that, but he missed out on something too.
This will be the last one.
My mother was around more than my dad because my dad had to work, but I recognize great kindness that he would work 50 to 60 hours a week to feed the family. I mean, we had a lot of people in our family. And I mean, he worked that much and we were still poor because we had so many people to feed and had to rent such a big house and everything. But it wasn't just about being there and being supportive at the moment, but about providing for us. And my mother, oh man, there's all her waking hours.
How many kids were there?
My mother had 13 kids.
13.
Yeah.
Yeah, there
And,
was
and 6 miscarriages in 19 years. Or no, 19 pregnancies in 20 years.
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
And I think she had a happy life.
She was I guess she wanted to be a mother. That wasn't forced on her. Okay. Okay, so we'll stop there. Dedicate the merit, positive energy.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances, Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Lobsang's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Guru Ramna Mandalakam Niryatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May the born have no decline, but increase forevermore.